It was in the oldest of times, before the world was covered in forest and iron was tamed by dwarven masters, before the advent of humanity and the mastery of bread and ale-making arts. The world was ruled by dragons and demons. Yes, draconic serpents and demonic creatures were the princes and princesses of the oldest times. They were the primordial forces through which the world and its primeval matter was formed, the sky, the mountains, and the fiery oceans of magma and unthinking life. They were opposing principles that made the world complete. Law and order versus chaos and madness. The stable and fixed versus the wild and eternally fluid. Dragons versus demons. The most ancient records tell of a draconic empire that once spanned much of the known world, where the emperor's peace was upheld by cruel dragon-mounted knights. But the texts also contain traces of another great power from a different age, governed by demon princes who shrouded the world in madness and savage rage. Remnants of these realms still rest in the earth beneath our feet. In the depths of the great forests and the chasms of the mountains slumber memories from ancient eras when vicious beasts reigned. The hostility between dragons and demons has brought death and ruin upon their ancient civilizations. It seems almost like a fundamental law of nature, that anything created by dragons alone is corrupted by demons, and anything born of demonic will is burned to ashes by dragon fire. However, this basic and incontrovertible truth also gives us cause for hope, for it has created the conditions for other nations, where humans and other races have been able to flourish and go their own way. But the ancient guardians of order and destruction will never leave the world to its fate. As sure as night follows day, the time will come again when dragons and demons contend for power over humanity, nature, and the eternal mysteries. Excerpt from Grumtag the Elder's Imperial Chronicle of the Oldest Times and Their Remnants. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mildra, and I will be your gaming monk for the evening. Conventional wisdom will tell you that the world's most litigious role-playing game, as it's known on this channel, is synonymous with role-playing games worldwide. Conventional wisdom is wrong. As with every rule, there are exceptions. I've spoken at length about the world of tabletop games in Japan, and to a lesser extent the tabletop games in Germany and Italy. But Sweden is another fascinating beast. Nowadays, everyone in the tabletop scene is somewhat aware of Free League, thanks to their work on games like the Alien RPG, which I've previously covered, as well as them publishing works like Mork Borg, and I've covered several games under the Year Zero family. Today, I'd like to look at the reincarnation of one of the origin stories of tabletop gaming in Sweden. Today, we're talking about Dragonbane. Originally known as Dragons and Demons when translated, as I will not butcher the original Swedish name, Dragonbane traces its origins to the early Swedish translations of Magic World by Chaosium, all the way back in 1982. It ended up taking a life of its own after the years, and what's now known as Dragonbane is almost a director's cut of that design, carrying the spirit of the original but reflecting on decades of game design evolution since. I suppose, technically speaking, that makes this a retro clone. However, for a whole new generation, they'll be looking at this for the first time, and I personally have to apply one of my mantras to this. Games, not names. As a final note of disclosure, I will note I was sent a physical review copy of the game a while back, but due to various outside factors, I couldn't review it at the time. In addition, during its Kickstarter run in 2022, I did back at the PDF level, and I have covered the Quick Start version of the game on the Valley of the Judged. As always, these things will not play a factor into my assessment. With that said, the question lies in how the game of Mirth and Mayhem holds up in my monastery. Let's find out. Dragonbane's core set is split into two books. Rules, which runs at 132 pages, and Adventures, which runs at 117 pages. Since the Adventures book is dedicated to the Secret of the Dragon Emperor campaign, I won't go into the latter book in this review, though I did enjoy the way its modules were presented. That being said, the books have the material clearly bookmarked, there is an index present in the back end, and the table of contents is hyperlinked in the PDF. Beyond that, it's presented quite clearly, and there's a consistency in the way certain terms are presented in the text, going out of its way to say things like green text boxes are dedicated to optional rules. It pretty much lays out everything that's important right out of the gate. Lastly, I do enjoy the art here in its presentation of a consistent theme, a vibe, if you will. Good stuff. Dragonbane's box set comes with a selection of pre-generated characters. and the proper character creation is very early on in the book. Which is good, I like when we get straight to the point. We'll be exploring the myriad steps to character creation with Aldine once again. So the first step is kin, the game's equivalent to race. Your choice of kin is human, halfling, dwarf, elf, mallard, and wolfkin. Yes, I said mallard. We can have duck knights in this game. This doesn't determine any stats just yet, but merely your innate ability. Most of the innate abilities cost around 3 willpower points, more on that later, and the only ones that don't are more passive affairs. It's also a nice touch that there's a bit of random name generation for each kin. In our case, we're going to go with human, which gives us the adaptive ability. This means that we can spend 3 willpower points to substitute a skill used for a skill roll with another skill. With GM permission, of course. Next is profession, the equivalent to class, but archetype or starting package would be more accurate. As your profession determines your starting gear, what skills you'll have a head start in, and what heroic ability you gain. The available professions are artisan, bard, fighter, hunter, knight, mage, mariner, merchant, scholar, and thief. Of these, we'll go with knight. This grants us the guardian heroic ability, as well as a broadsword, a small shield, plate armor, a great helm, a torch, flint and tinder, 6 food rations, and 12 silver. Next are your attribute scores. These are generated by rolling 4d6 and dropping the lowest, assigning each result to one of the 6 abilities. This will be very familiar to people. With that in mind, we generate the following scores. Strength 18, Constitution 16, Agility 13, Intelligence 12, Willpower 14, and Charisma 12. I know some of you may find this familiar, but trust me when I say it's not exactly what you're thinking. Anyways, after generating these, we then generate our movement, damage bonus, hit points, and willpower points. For the movement, it's based on kin and agility. In our case being 12 meters, 10 from human and 2 more from having an agility of 13. For damage bonus, this is an additional damage die for strength and agility-based weapons. In our case, D6 for strength and D4 for agility. Lastly, HP and willpower points are directly based on your constitution and willpower respectively. So we have 16 HP and 14 willpower. Next comes skills. Each skill has an associated attribute that determines the base chance of a skill. Of these, you may choose 10 skills to have trained, which doubles the base chance of that skill. Regardless, at least 6 skills have to be from your profession's skill list. Now of the skills available, we'll choose Awareness, Beast Lore, Evade, Languages, Myths and Legends, Persuasion, Spot Hidden, Hammers, Spears, and Swords as our trained skills, doubling their base chance. Lastly, Heroic abilities. Now unless you're a mage, you'll have 2 abilities, one from your kin and one from your profession. In our case, we're going with Adaptive and Guardian. I already mentioned Adaptive, and Guardian just allows us to get in the way a la cover. Character creation is pretty straightforward, and I could see it being done quickly, especially with the random generators. That said, there are some old habits that do show up, namely some attributes getting more love in the skill list than others, as well as the fact that the one-page character sheet works against itself regarding heroic abilities and spells. That little text box in there is just not going to be enough beyond early games. I kind of am reminded of the one-sheet insistence with a lot of White Wolf games. I mean, it's cute for one-shots, but if you're doing an extended campaign, especially in games like Exalted, you're going to want something bigger. Additionally, I didn't see much in the way of high-level character creation advice, but it is possible I may have missed something. That can kind of happen when you're going through these books. All said, it certainly works, but much like my days with White Wolf games, I do not agree with them doing a one-page character sheet. Dragonbane is a D20-based game, but it's one where the emphasis is on aiming low rather than high. When attempting an action, you're rolling a D20 and trying to get under the skill rating that you have. A natural 1 and a natural 20 are considered rolling a dragon and a demon, respectively, and are thus automatically successes or failures, again, respectively. Rolling a dragon or demon is also key to providing opportunities in advancing skills in a use-to-improve kind of way. Rolls can be modified with boons and banes, which act similar to advantage and disadvantage. In addition to that, if you fail a roll, you can choose to push it. If you do, you suffer a condition associated with that skill's linked attribute, and thus suffer a bane to skills that use that attribute. This is something very common in the Year Zero engine. Combat, however, has a few tweaks. Instead of rolling for initiative, You have a set of cards numbered 1 to 10. Each participant draws 1 card, with 1 going first and 10 going last. These initiative cards are not set, as at the start of the next round, but everyone draws cards again. During everyone's turn, they may perform 1 movement and 1 action. I don't mind this, but the fact that reactions take up your action is something that bugs me. On the other hand, I do like that you have 3 options when you roll a dragon on attacks. You can double the damage dice, perform a second attack against another enemy, or ignore armor against the enemy you are targeting. Speaking of, I do like that armor is straight damage reduction, one that can potentially cause weapon breakage if using the durability rules. Beyond that, the core mechanics are pretty to the point. But since I hinted at it earlier, let's talk a bit more on how willpower is used with heroic abilities and magic. We'll start with the latter, as it's going to be more straightforward. Heroic abilities are special abilities you can use willpower points on to perform certain effects. Each ability has a particular skill level requirement, and lists the willpower points it costs to use the effect. Now there are exceptions to this, and most usually use 2 or 3 points of willpower. To be honest, the only thing I could see being a potential problem is the fact that abilities are all in one big list. This isn't as bad as, say, feat lists in certain more litigious games, because there's not ability chains or anything like that, but it may have been better to categorize them into certain skill or archetype lists just for ease of reference, especially since there will inevitably be more abilities added through expansions and or homebrew. That said, on to magic. Like many things, magic is a skill, specifically one of the 4 secondary skills tied to intelligence: animism, elementalism, mentalism, and general magic. The concept of prepared spells is present, in this case based on your intelligence attribute's chance. However, all spells cost willpower, and there's no set number of spells per day you can cast. If you don't have willpower, you may roll a single die of your choice and gain that much willpower to immediately use, but also take the same amount of damage. While spells do have ranks, this merely determines how much willpower a spell costs, usually double the listed rank. The exception is magic tricks, which always cost 1 willpower. Unfortunately, the spell list total page ratio isn't that excessive compared to other games, but it does hammer home the fact that the small part of the character sheet for abilities and spells I mentioned before won't cut it after a few sessions. Hearing that the game has its roots in Chaosium's magic world makes a lot of things fall into place. The DNA of basic role-playing is certainly present, although nowhere near as skill-heavy as that game is. But through things like the damage die bonus, the learn-by-doing approach to skills, and the more free-form creation and advancement are definitely telltale signs. Even with a couple nitpicks I have personally, there's too much good that Dragonbane is doing, and the emphasis on skills along with going with an MP-like pool for abilities and spells will make it a very approachable game. I know I get on some games for the setting problem, but Dragonbane does sidestep this a bit through a consistent art style and not claiming to be able to handle all kinds of fantasy. Plus, the theming of dragons versus demons certainly helps. Back when I covered the starter set on Valley of the Judged, I said this could be an easier intro to tabletop than the world's most litigious RPG, and seeing the core set has only reinforced that. Consider this. This core set that I've been reviewing in this video contains the core rules, an 11-adventure campaign, a dungeon delve for solo play, adventure and battle map, and the full range of dice, 5 pre-gen characters, 5 blank sheets, a collection of standees, all of that for a little over $50, according to the main site. Compare that to the 2014 core set of the world's most litigious role-playing game that runs at about $140 and contains the core books and maybe the GM screen if you're lucky. But none of the other stuff to actually run things. You still need to get that on your own. You'd still need to get dice, you still need to get minis, you still need to get potentially a map, and so on and so forth. With just the rules alone, I was already high on Dragonbane. Coupled with what's in its core set, this is a strongly recommended. Dragonbane's a strong foundation, and I can easily see myself recommending it to newcomers who have a background in skill-based CRPGs and sandbox-style MMOs, especially stuff like the Elder Scrolls, as well as a more beer and pretzels play, with the whole mirth and mayhem tagline that the game has. What also helps is the fact that you have a full starter campaign with all the fiddly bits right out of the box. I can really think of no reason not to try out Dragonbane, and the growing third party makes it all the more appealing. Speaking of, I'm really looking forward to the Lone Wolf adaptation coming soon, as I feel that's a natural fit for this game. Stay frosty!
In